Hi everyone, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. Before we bring on tonight's guest, if you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting and would like to be a guest on Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com and submit a report. All right, let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Matt. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Vic. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. Matt, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
All right. Well, I'm 28 years old. I'm married. I have 2 kids, one 3, the other just about to be 1. I'm a father, a mechanic, and an outdoorsman in that order. I love hunting, fishing, camping, hiking, backpacking, pretty much the gambit. I've been doing it basically as long as I could walk since I was 2 or 3 years old. So I guess you could say it's in my blood a little bit. I'm a Coloradan, born and raised. My family has actually been here in the state since about 1852, 1853. Being around that long, it's one of those things where there's inevitably a little bit of history attached to the family. Specifically, in my case, we were one of the first groups of people to settle in the Estes Park, Colorado area. And a little bit later on in the early 1900s, some of the people who helped make Estes Park a tourist destination, so to speak. That was through the purchase, renovation, and then kind of rebirth of a place called Horseshoe Inn. It was just inside the boundaries of Rocky Mountain National Park. And when that property was purchased, my family also built a cabin about halfway between what is Estes Park town proper and the inn itself, to kind of help aid in if weather turned or something of that nature. They'd be able to stay there for a day or a night or whatever it may be in order to be able to get whatever supplies or what have you back to the inn. So being a Coloradan and an outdoorsman, I've seen my fair share of wild animals, predators, and what I saw this last Sunday is unlike anything I've seen previously.
Well, understandably so. I hope you never see one again, but that's left to be seen. Like you touched on a bit ago, the encounters that we're going to talk about tonight happened right on the edge of Rocky Mountain National Park. What more can you tell us about the park?
Well, it was incorporated during the National Park Act under FDR, I believe. And it's one of the few places in Colorado that's still untouched by any sort of development or encroachment as far as habitat goes. According to the Park Service, there are mountain lions and coyotes still around in the national park, but because of incentivized poaching, I guess you could call it, in the 1930s during the Depression, there aren't any wolves left at all. There was I think it was a $5 bounty put on every single pelt or animal that people were able to bring in. And, when everybody's out of work and, unable to provide for themselves any other way, that became incredibly popular. So they literally wiped out the wolf population there in the park.
You just told us about the wildlife in the area, but please tell us about the topography of the area where you live.
Well, it's mountainous. Pretty much nothing is less than a 30% incline. And the house being that it backs directly to the park, it's set on the side of a mountain. As you enter the area where both the house and the park are, you're entering a valley, and it's like a funnel almost, where anything that would be coming in or out inevitably has to take that route. It's path of least resistance, so to speak. And there's quite a bit of ponderosa pine, lodgepole pine. So it's forested, but in the area where my family's property is, because of the construction and the time that it was done, a lot of that forestation has been pushed back a fair amount, at least, I would say 50 yards, closer to 100. And we have a few select larger trees for shade specifically, but for the most part, it's rocks, some cactus, a lot of scrub brush. And as you get, further into the park, obviously all that forestation comes back. Unfortunately, due to pine beetle kill, there's a whole lot that has been removed in the past couple of years, so it isn't as forested as it once was, but still it's wild. It's, like I said, pretty much untouched by humans. So,
Well, it sounds like my kind of country. It sounds beautiful.
it absolutely is.
Well, I believe it. I'm sure it is. From what I understand, the National Park Service sent out interesting letters to property owners in your area this year. Please expand on that for us.
Yeah, that was definitely odd. That was the first time that they've ever done anything like that. They specifically, the neighborhood, I guess you could call it, where our property is, they sent out a notice that there was a large predator in the area, something large enough that it would be able to take down elk. And that's their concern basically was that people wouldn't leave pets or children outside unattended, especially close to dawn and dusk, as that's the time that predators are generally more active. And like I said, they've never done anything like that previously. It's unusual to say the least. I mean, I would hazard a guess to say that it has to do with the fact that COVID-19 has kept the lion's share of the tourism and then also property owners from, coming up from either other states or the Denver metro area. That would obviously encourage anything that is skittish around people or wants to avoid people. That would have them coming closer into town, closer into those populated areas where an encounter would be possible.
Yeah, it is kind of odd that they would send out letters like that. I wonder what it was that they were talking about. Of course, we're never going to know for sure what it was, but we have an idea what it might have been.
Yeah, and my wife actually sent me an article that was posted Sunday that talks about a county just a little bit east and slightly north of Estes Park that wolves have been sighted. And then also in that report, they talk about a wolf-like creature, quote unquote, that has been sighted further, or not east, rather, west of Estes Park. And then this wolf-like creature that they spoke of was sighted about 75 miles due east of Moffat County, is where these pack of 6 wolves were captured on game cameras. So it's an interesting coincidence.
Oh, it sure is. Yeah, no denying that. When we spoke about your encounter for the first time, Matt, understandably so, you had a hard time telling me about what happened to you. How different was that first conversation than you expected it to be, or what you expected to get from it?
Being that I've never had any sort of run-in with an animal that I wasn't familiar with, or one of that size, that close, I expected the conversation to be, for lack of a better term, a little bit less easy or a little bit more difficult. It was easily the most trying experience I've had, both individually and as a father, being that my oldest daughter was involved in it. It seemed previous to the discussion that I was going to have a really difficult time really sussing out all the details and reliving it, so to speak. It was pretty traumatic.
Well, like I said, understandably so. I know it wasn't easy to do, but I'm so glad you did it, because like I told you, that's definitely part of the healing process. Having said that, though, how much easier do you expect it to be to talk about what happened to you tonight than it was for you that first time?
I think it's going to be a fair amount easier, being that in our discussion you mentioned 7 words that kind of use as a mantra to help not only rationalize but kind of understand the modus operandi of these creatures a little bit better, that they're not bloodthirsty monsters looking to kill you at any point, that they're going to be hiding around, the tree or the corner or the rock and just itching to get you, or in this case, my kids. Those 7 words have helped quite a bit.
Well, great. That's what this is all about. And like I told you also, I'm not saying that they can't be dangerous. I'm just saying that they're not bloodthirsty, mindless killers that are always going to be out to get you. So, yeah, I just wanted to hammer home that point with you. All right, Matt, please tell us about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
All right. Thank you, Vic. The night specifically that this happened, my family and I, wife and 2 kids, we had made it up to Estes Park a little bit later than usual. It isn't usual for us to go up on a Sunday evening specifically, but this was going to be my vacation from work. I don't usually take vacation, so being that I had the whole week off, it wasn't really a problem. The day and evening went pretty normal, nothing out of the ordinary. We put the kids down right around 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, somewhere in there. And then the grown-ups, me, myself, my wife, and my mom, we all stayed up watching a movie, and that wrapped up right around 11 o'clock. Shortly after, my mother and my wife, they went off to bed. And being that I'm a bit of a night owl and starting my vacation, I wanted to stay up a little bit. As I mentioned previously, I'm a mechanic, both professionally and as a hobby. So what I enjoy doing in off time is working out and planning out various builds that I'm planning on, doing for either clients or friends or family. So I had been sitting alone at the kitchen table there in our house. It's an older house, so in order to get any kind of real ventilation or airflow, we generally speaking keep windows open. The front door is one of those that has part of it's all glass, but the door is mostly glass, and then it can slide down, and a portion of it can reveal a screen. So that's how we had it. I could hear all the sounds of the hillside coming in clearly, the crickets. We have a couple owls that live in trees nearby. And then obviously the smaller critters, the ground squirrels occasionally, and then also chipmunks, mice, things like that. So I'm sitting there at the table doing my planning, researching on my phone, and then writing in a notebook that I have shortly after 11, as I said. And I noticed something move quickly to my right across the window. It's a dark night. There wasn't a whole lot of moon, so I couldn't make out really shape or size or anything of that nature, just that there was movement quickly. So I stood up, I took out the flashlight that I always have on me, and I turned it on and looked out the window. As I mentioned, the house is real old, so the windows are really old as well. You get a lot more glare coming back at you than you get light transmission through the window themselves. I didn't see anything. So I thought, okay, whatever it was is gone. I sat back down, went back to what I was doing. Maybe about 5 minutes after that, I saw movement back the other direction, which kind of raised an eyebrow. Usually, in my experience, when wildlife comes close enough to where they see people or smell people even, they'll get away, they'll go their separate way, and then they definitely don't come back. They don't return. So being that this isn't usual or common, I stood up and I looked around a little bit more than I had previously. I checked out the window that I saw it in, and then also the window directly in front of me that faces west. Didn't see anything again. And I tried to go back to what I was doing, but I got the distinct feeling, really creepy feeling, that I was being watched. So I decided, I'm sitting here in front of these big windows that face the back of the hillside. I'm going to move into the living room where we have a high back couch, and I'll resume there. That, I'd never gotten a feeling like that before in our house. We're really far off the beaten path. It's not somewhere where, somebody going for an evening stroll could just happen upon the backside of our property. like I said, we butt right up against the national park, so it isn't likely that somebody would just be, going for a jog along the side of the hill. I continued doing what I was doing, researching and writing, and eventually I fell asleep. It was about an hour later, probably a little bit after midnight, that I woke up with a start. I was dead asleep, passed out, dare I say. I was drooling on myself, and I was all of a sudden wide awake, and I didn't know why. So, being that I was sleeping, chin on chest, my glasses had fallen down off of my face. I pick them up and I put them back on, and I look up, and as I mentioned these windows previously, you get more reflection or glare than you do transmission, especially at night when there isn't light coming from the outside. And when I looked up into the bay windows that we have directly across, I saw the silhouette of someone standing against the glass with their face pressed up against it, their hands pressed up against it, sort of drumming or tapping, like someone would do if they're bored, pinky finger to index. But instead of hearing the low, kind of thud sound that would usually make, it was a harsh tap, almost like fingernails were making contact and not the pads of their fingers. And this has never happened. Nobody's ever come on our property, let alone had a prowler that close or that kind of an encounter. So I'm used to being in the outdoors, and Colorado is still pretty wild. So anytime I'm out and about, I carry a firearm with me. And at this point, I had changed my clothes out of pants and whatnot, so I had it just kind of tucked into my backpack. I grabbed as quickly as I could, rummaging through, knocking all the junk out of the way. I grabbed my pistol, my flashlight, and I jumped up and spun around as quickly as I could. And as I'm running toward the front door to try and confront this person who's on my property, I catch the edge of the couch and kind of stumble, which slows me down. And then coming out the door, both of my hands were full, so it wasn't the easiest to get the handle to disengage, to open. And by the time I get around the corner, there's nothing there. I don't see any sign of somebody having been there, or even like catch the tail end of them going around the far end of the house, which raised a red flag. The house is probably a good 45, closer to 50 feet in length from where I was standing to the other corner. And if a person could move that quickly, they're obviously either very large or very in shape, and that was the concern. So at that point, I did a perimeter check. I walked down to the other end, shined my light down, didn't see anything. Walked back to where I had started, went down the driveway. Same thing, didn't see anything. So I was really concerned at this point, understandably, that there's somebody on my property. It's late at night, and it's my children, my wife, and my mother here, and me. I'm the only one awake. I'm the only one who saw this person. So I need to make sure that whoever it is isn't going to come back, isn't going to try and get into a window or a door. So I go back inside, and I just kind of sit there and I wait to see if this person is going to show themselves again. About an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours goes by, periodically standing up, going to the window, shining the light out, just trying to see if maybe they're going to come back, if I'm going to see him again. And I hadn't seen anything. So that concern level, that level of nerves at level 1000, that fight or flight feeling had decreased to the point where I'm like, okay, maybe it was just a tourist, somebody who didn't know there were houses here and was just peeking inside because they saw the light. Whoever it was is gone. They're not coming back. So, I'll go outside, smoke my e-cigarette a little bit with just nicotine, no drugs. I know it's Colorado, so I felt I should clarify that. But, I step out on the front porch, and as soon as I stepped out, I noticed right away that the normal sounds of the hillside that I described earlier, the owl, uh, various smaller animals running about, the crickets chirping, all of that was gone. It was dead quiet, like pin drop quiet. And as I'm trying to listen to see, why is it that this has changed so drastically so quickly, I hear what sounds like footsteps on the driveway below me. The way the house is constructed, like many mountain homes, a portion of it is built into the hillside. So to get from the porch where I'm standing to the driveway, I have to go down a series of flagstone steps to get down to the driveway. Obviously, the experience from before, I'm still on guard a little bit, but previously, not as much. And I have my flashlight, so I'm descending the stairs slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible because I'm thinking whoever was at the window previously is back, and I need to either apprehend this person so that the police can deal with them, or just tell them to get out of here, don't come back, you're not welcome. So I'm descending these stairs, toe to heel, trying to make as little noise as possible. But one of the very last steps on this staircase, because they are natural flagstones, doesn't sit quite true or quite level. So as I put my weight on it, as carefully as I could, it rocked back and forth, making a kind of like clunk clunk sound. And when that happened, I heard a growl or like a grunt almost. At first it sounded to me like a mixture between like what a bear will do, when they're just trying to make themselves known. But there was a like throaty rumble, almost like a tiger or a lion, some sort of, very large predator where their vocal cords kind of vibrate. And I froze. I knew at that point that this isn't a person that's a few feet away from me. This is some sort of very, very large animal. And I need to back away as quietly and as carefully as I possibly can in order to not make this thing think that I'm threatening it or push any unwanted buttons that could potentially prompt some sort of confrontation. So I'm backing back up the stairs. I get all the way back up to the top of the concrete pad that is the porch. And from previous experience, from, the training I got being wilderness survival instructor and being in the outdoors so much, you're told to make as much noise as possible, make yourself seem as big as possible so that whatever it is thinks that it's too big of a fight and it's not worth it. So I grabbed a stick that my daughter had been playing with earlier in the day, and I started smacking it against the pine, the wooden post, the upright on the edge of the porch, and yelling. About probably the third or fourth smack, I'm focusing on where I'm hitting this stick, because a lot of what makes up the railings of our porch are old antique hand carved, like as you could call them, figurines, and I didn't want to damage anything and get in trouble. So my focus is there, but I can still, in my forward field of vision, see down the staircase all the way to the driveway. I see a blur, this animal tear off to the west down the length of the level portion of our driveway. And the size of it and the pace at which this thing moved, and then also the locomotion that it had was absolutely like nothing I'd ever seen previously in my 28 years being in the outdoors of Colorado. I've seen black bears run away or run towards something. I've seen on occasion coyotes, and then I've also had occasion to see cougars, and then in a wolf sanctuary up in northern Colorado, I've seen them run as well. So it was so fast, so big, that while standing there on the last step and the concrete pad of the porch, I could feel the concussion through the ground each time this thing took a stride. And it was down on all fours at this point, sort of as it took a stride forward with its back legs, it would push off and launch itself forward, grab the ground, kind of throw its arms behind it almost like a primate you would expect, and then continue on. And it was fast. It goes the length of our driveway on the upper portion, and right on the edge there on the west, there's a draw or a small gully that drops down about 20 feet, and it disappears over the edge. So I freak out. I run back inside. I lock that, outside glass door. I shut and lock the solid wood door that's behind it. And then I run downstairs and I make sure that the downstairs door is shut and locked. And then as well, all of the windows that were on that level are shut and locked. And as I said, I'm freaking out. I've never seen anything this big or this fast. And the weight that it had, being able to move that quickly, I know that this thing is strong. It's incredibly powerful. So I don't want to get any closer than I already was. I don't want to push any buttons. I want to keep myself separate from this animal for the remainder of the evening, and hopefully it'll just go away. I'm sort of pacing back and forth in our living room, looking out the windows, trying to see if it's come back or if it just, went on its way, for a little bit more than an hour, probably closer to an hour and a half. And that's when I hear my daughter, my oldest, calling for me from her bedroom that's set further back in the house, kind of on a portion of the hillside that has been leveled for construction. So I quickly, tiptoe my way back through the house, get to her room, and she's sitting straight up in bed, half awake, kind of rubbing her eyes. She's got, a fist in one hand and her Lammy, her little Lovey in the other, rubbing it on her face. And I can tell that she's not really all the way awake. And anybody who has kids knows once they're all the way conscious and awake, it's an absolute bear to try and get them to go back down. So I quickly stand up on the lower bunk of the bunk bed that she's in. I'm telling her, "Oh, baby, it's okay. Lay back down, go back to sleep." And she's trying to tell me something, but even though the fact that she's 3, she still sleeps with a binky, and she's half asleep, so she's kind of mumbling, and between that and the binky in her mouth, I can't make out anything that she's saying. I'm kind of pushing her down gently, trying to get her to just lay back down and go to sleep, and she's still kind of babbling, mumbling, and as her head comes to the pillow and she rolls to the side, the binky kind of falls out a little bit, and I hear her say that she was mad that she had to tell Randall that she couldn't come out to play. I ask her, what do you mean, who's Randall? And she says, Daddy from Hotel Transylvania. For those who haven't seen the movie, it's a kid's movie, Hotel Transylvania. It's animated, and one of the characters is a werewolf. stands on 2 feet and walks like a person, and his name is Randall. So I'm like, baby, what are you talking about? Is this a dream you had? Is what's, just trying to get to the bottom of what it is that's happening here, trying to get her to sleep. And she says, no, Daddy, he came to my window and kept asking me to come outside to play. And that really set the hairs on the back of my neck on end. So I look over toward the window, and the way I'm standing, the elevation that I'm standing at, I can see over the curtain rod out the window, and then also there's a probably about 4, maybe 5 inch gap where the curtains have kind of been pulled open a little bit. And in that gap, the first thing that I saw was a massive yellow-orange eye, probably about the size of my fist, maybe smaller. And my heart fell into my stomach, and immediately it was full fight or flight or freeze. And so I see the eye first, and my eyes are darting back and forth, the only portion of my body that I can move at this point in time. And I notice next that the head on this thing is absolutely massive. It's a standard size window, so it's about 48 inches across, and the head on this thing is taking up almost half, or not half, almost half of the whole window, the majority of one of the panes. And then its shoulders are, from what I can see, every bit as much of the entire length of this window. The other absolutely unnerving thing about this situation is this window is set up off of the ground, where the bottom of the sill sits at almost 6 feet. So this thing standing in the window, it's got to be every bit of 8, maybe 9 feet tall. I could see on its head, on the top, it had pointed ears, of an elongated face or snout, and I could see its teeth hanging over or out of its mouth, almost like maybe it couldn't close its mouth all the way. Its ears periodically would twitch, as like a dog does when they're either trying to swat away an insect or listening for various sounds. And I'm as quickly as I can, but this all seemed like an absolute eternity. I'm trying to think, what can I do? It's right maybe 4 or 5 feet away from me, and every bit as close to my daughter. And your job, number one job as a father is to make sure that your kids are protected and that they're safe. So I think to myself that I've got to do something.
You're doing great. Take your time. There's no hurry.
And I'm frozen still. I can't move. At that moment, realizing that I have to do something, this thing is close enough to where if it wanted to, it could come through the window. It's already tried to get my daughter outside by herself. I have to do something to get rid of it. I still have my pistol on me. It's just kind of tucked into my gym shorts in the pocket, sort of haphazardly hanging there. And I start inching my hand down my side to my right pocket. And as soon as I got my hand around the grip, it growled, almost like to say, don't try it. And the growl was much louder than the one that I had heard earlier. The volume and then also the pitch that this thing emits sound at is so bassy that I felt it vibrating in my chest. The only thing I can liken it to is like if you're at a concert. For me, it felt like I used to go to electronic like dance music concerts when I was younger. Dubstep, stuff like that, heavy bass music, and it vibrated my chest the same way that a massive, super loud, bass drop would. And I could feel it. I'm holding on to the guardrail with my left hand for the upper bunk bed. And the window rattled a little bit as well, because it's cracked open just a little bit. And as soon as it growled, the next thing that I hear is my almost 1-year-old start crying in the room that my wife and I share next to us, next to my daughter's room. And I think to myself, this isn't going to happen. I have to do something. So I snatch my daughter, my oldest, out of her bed. And as fast as I've ever moved in my entire life, slam through the door of her room. And it's maybe 2 strides, 1, 2, to my door. Smash that one open, and I toss my daughter into the bed with my wife and my youngest. And the entire time I've got a gun in one hand. So, I mean, it's not at all well thought out or safe, but the only thought in my mind is I have to protect my family. And at that point in time, as soon as I take my eyes from where I put my daughter, I look forward, and through the window in my wife and I's room, I can now see the entirety of this thing. We have not like real curtains, but like sheer see-through curtains. And muscle memory or instinct, whatever you want to call it, takes over, and immediately I press out and present like I'm about to take a shot. And it growls even louder, or I would call it a roar. And it opened its mouth that time, kind of pulling back its lips. And this thing, unlike a wolf or a dog, the corner of its mouth came like further back in its cheek. And when it opened its mouth, it looked like it was sneering or like smiling, almost like it was taunting me. So I can feel my finger taking up the slack on the trigger, and it launches itself up the hill. Behind our house, we have it's dug into the hillside, and we have a retaining wall to keep the hill back and erosion control. And from the level it was standing to the hillside above is every bit of 20 feet. My wife then sits up in bed, and her first the first thing that she said to me is that you woke up the baby Why are you making so much noise? Why are you slamming doors? Do you know what time it is? And it's like 4:45, almost 5 o'clock, pre-dawn. So it's not nearly as dark as it was before. Sun's starting to come up. And I tell her, I saw an animal, go back to sleep. And she sits up and she looks over at me, and I'm still standing there with the weapon presented, shaking, because I'm terrified. Like I know that because of experiences that I've been in previously, that if it's a bear, if it's a cougar, if it's a coyote, if it's anything, I'm a hunter. I've run into these things before. I can handle myself. The speed, the strength, the size of this thing, and the fact that it had almost 3-inch, what looked like straight razor sharp claws on the end of its hands, it rocked me. So she sees me standing there with the gun in my hand pointed at the window, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I reiterate, I just saw an animal, go back to bed. And my daughter, my oldest, she's a real heavy sleeper. So she really didn't wake up through this whole thing all the way. And in her kind of same half asleep, delirium, in and out of consciousness as before, she tells her mom, "Mommy, it's okay. Randall was just wanting to play." "Yeah, go back to sleep, Mommy." My wife looks at me like I'm crazy for a minute. She tells me, "Don't even think of firing that thing in here," and then lays back down and pulls our 1-year-old close to her and comforts her and gets her to go back to sleep. And I stood there frozen, shaking for maybe another 2 or 3 minutes, just trying to process what had just happened. And I went into the closet and I grabbed, family's got an old Henry 4570, which is it's a very, very large caliber rifle, a cowboy lever action style rifle that we've used to take elk on the property before. And this thing was every bit as heavy as a massive bull elk, because of the way that I could feel it move through the ground earlier. And I figure if it's going to come back, that I need something more than a little 9mm to keep it from hurting my family. So I go out the front door, lock it behind me. The way the house is built, you can kind of straddle one side of the porch and walk along and get up on the roof. So that's what I did. I got on the highest point of the roof and I tucked down behind, and I sat up there and I waited. I'm essentially waiting for this thing to come back, waiting for the, in my mind, the inevitable battle that was sure to come. It had ran off once before, but come back, and it ran off a second time now after it's seen that I had a gun. And it was like it knew either what a gun was or what it could do because of the almost like warning that it gave me in my daughter's bedroom when I first grabbed my pistol. So I stay up there on the roof, trying not to move, just trying to be as situationally aware as I possibly can, until I hear my mom awake down in the kitchen below me. And then I came back down and, put the rifle up, and, I told my mom that, there was a really big animal on the hillside earlier, and just watch out. Abby's going to be awake soon, my oldest, and don't let her go outside. She loves playing in the wildflowers and doing little girl stuff, running around the hillside. and we usually have no problem letting her out on her own. So I tell her, if she's going to go out, stay with her. Don't let her out of your sight. And she could tell, I mean, as I'm sure any mother could, that something was really bothering me, but she didn't ask any more questions. Just let me walk back to my room. My wife is getting herself and my youngest up at this point, and I tell her I'm going back to sleep, and she was upset, that I hadn't been to sleep yet, and that, the day is starting, the kids are waking up, and she's going to be on her own, without any kind of help from me. So I just tell her, I didn't sleep at all last night. There was something outside that kept coming back to the house. Came right up to the house. I need to lay down and sleep. I'm exhausted. But I didn't. I really didn't get any good sleep until after the conversation that you and I had, Vic. Kind of explaining what it was that I saw and how it is that they usually act. Because I thought I had just seen something that is supposed to be myth or legend or not real. I thought that I had seen a werewolf. Come to find out that it's they're called Dogman, and they're basically everywhere across the United States and in other countries too. A lot of people go through the same kind of thing. So.
That they do, unfortunately. You gave us some details already, but please describe it as accurately as you can from top to bottom, Matt.
As I said, it had a very, very large head. I can't give an exact size, but it took up almost the entirety of a 24-inch pane of glass on the window, and it had a grayish brown fur like a normal wolf would. Just gray brown fur, and it was coarse. It wasn't like it didn't look like it would be soft to touch like a long-haired dog would. It looked like coyote or wolf fur would be. The skin that I could see underneath the fur was gray tan almost, and black nose, huge massive shoulders. That was one of the very first things that I noticed, that it had traps that looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger, bodybuilder, Mr. Universe, just huge. It was male. I could tell that. Had the entire torso, looked like a bodybuilder. I could see abs, not like, linear type stomach muscles that a regular wolf would have. And the fur kind of thinned a little bit toward the upper chest area around had a scar on the right hand side of its chest. Its arms were much longer than its torso, and its hands, it had hands. It wasn't paws or anything that you would normally expect from some sort of canid. And the right forearm also had a little bit of hair thinning around another scar, or I guess what looked like a scar. It was discolored, different from the other skin that I could see through the fur, and it was kind of knotty, knotted or bulky like regular scar tissue would be if you had some sort of injury that required stitches, but you couldn't get them. Like I said, it was male. I could, I had a full frontal view of this thing, and it had incredibly muscular legs, but not bulky bodybuilder like the upper body was. It looked almost like a marathon runner, I wouldn't say slender, but very lean, sinewy looking type of muscle. where when it crouched down to launch itself up the hill, I saw all the muscles on its legs ripple, and engage, contract, and then it moved so fast when it jumped up that I didn't see anything after that. Its lower legs, though, from what I would call the knee down, it looked like a greyhound or a Weimaraner, some really sinewy but fit dog, something that could run really fast, where all that's there is bone, skin, and tendon. And then its feet were painted, but they were every bit as big as my feet. And I'm a pretty good sized person, so absolutely the most intimidating and terrifying animal, creature, whatever you want to call it, that I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, I'm sure it was. You said that it definitely was a male. Would you say that its phallus was more canid-like or human-like in appearance?
I would say a mixture of both. As weird as that sounds, like a dog, there's a portion that was fur covered, but also that could be kind of like a human being with hair. But then part of the reason I know what color its skin was, it didn't have any there. So any fur, rather.
Well, it must have been quite the sight to see. Has anything happened of note since your encounters on Sunday night, Matt?
Not really. I mean, as soon as I kind of composed myself enough to come out of my bedroom, what would be Monday morning, early afternoon, I kind of filled my wife in as much as I could while limiting the amount of information I gave her, because I was worried. The thing I saw is not supposed to exist, so she's going to think I'm crazy. But just really impressing upon her that the stuff that we normally do in around the house with our kids wouldn't be safe. So we need to leave. We need to get out of here. We can't stay. And all different variations of that. And she's at this point understandably upset. As I said earlier, we don't get a lot of vacation. I work all the time. And because of my schedule, we don't see each other all that much. It's going to be vacations are supposed to be enjoyable and relaxing. Before the first 24 hours of us being up there at my family's property was over, I had the most terrifying experience of my life. So I didn't see how I could relax after that.
Yeah, that's definitely understandable. Speaking of your wife, it sounds like she didn't hear the vocalization the Dogman made at Abigail's window. Did she hear it vocalize when it was looking in your bedroom window? It sounds like she didn't.
I asked her about that last night when we kind of discussed things in a little bit more detail, and she said that she heard something, but she chalked it up to I'm dreaming. It's not a sound like any animal that I've seen or heard, and she's spent, being that she's from back east from a major city, she's not used to the same type of animal noises or hasn't been exposed to the same amount. So like I said, she chalked it up to dreaming, but she said that she did hear something very low, guttural, but she said that it was the slamming, the banging of the doors that initially woke her up, and then what caused her to open her eyes was that last roar, I guess you could say. But like I said, she said she thought she was still half asleep, that she was, still in a REM cycle and dreaming. Didn't think really anything of it. She was trying to figure out what the heck is happening, why her baby's crying, and why I just came running into the room, smashing doors open, shortly thereafter why the heck I'm pointing a gun out the window like I'm about to shoot inside our house.
Yeah, it's awfully frustrating that she didn't hear it and actually realize what it was that was just outside the window. Despite all of your experience in the outdoors with wildlife, Matt, you said your wife thinks you mistook a common animal for the dogman you saw. How frustrated has that made you?
Incredibly. You're supposed to, or at least it's my belief that 100% honesty, transparency is the best policy, especially in a marriage, let alone any friendship. And my wife is my best friend. And it bothered me immensely that she thought that I mistook something else, that it was late and I was sleep deprived and my eyes were playing tricks on me. My brain was playing tricks on me, that kind of thing. But I explained to her extensively ad nauseum that I've seen everything that I thought it could have been, but it wasn't any of those things. It was far larger, and its anatomy, the way that it's made up, it looks halfway between a giant human being and like a wolf. So there is no animal in nature or known to science or man that has that makeup other than, at that point in time, what I said was werewolf. But, since then, since our discussion, Dogman. There's nothing else that it could be.
Now that you've had an up close and personal with one, what do you think dogmen are?
I like to consider myself a hyper-logical and analytical person, but at the same time, I am religious. I'm a Christian. And in the Bible, as well as other, ancient texts, it talks about how fallen angels or extraterrestrials or whatever you want to call it came from somewhere else here, or in case of the Bible, came from heaven to here and genetically altered humans and then their offspring, or them directly altered the genetics of animals, all the beasts of the land, air, and sea, as well as the reptiles and all the things that crawl. So, I think they're exactly what they look like. I think they're somehow, I don't know with any kind of certainty, but it's a hybridization between a hominid, a human-like creature, and a canid of some sort. This one in particular looked like a wolf. I've heard other instances since then on your show of, people who saw ones that were black, which I don't know of any wolves or animals in nature that are 100% pure black. So it could be my ignorance of the subject, but I don't think they're any kind of like government experiment, because, like you said, these things have been sighted since the mid 1800s, and there was no kind of technology that existed back then to, send a message through an electrical wire, like telephone, and in a lot of cases even telegraph, let alone the ability to genetically modify or alter or splice, like CRISPR, human DNA or whatever into a canid. It's just, I don't think that's it. I think that either through some distant common ancestor or through like the legends and fables and myths from these ancient texts, direct meddling from something that's otherworldly, for lack of a better term, these things can be.
Well, as you know, we could have a separate show on that topic right there alone. Do you have any regrets about going outside the way you did after you saw it looking in at you?
Yeah, absolutely. After seeing it, as close as I would ever want to be, as face to face with it later in the evening, it was so incredibly foolish for me to just hard charge right out the door like I'm the biggest, baddest thing on this mountain. Nothing is going to encroach, nothing or no one, as I thought at that time, is going to encroach on my property, my family. This is ours. At that point in time, I thought I was Rambo going to chase off, just a person, but it was definitely foolish for me to just go barging out the door like that, because if it had any desire to whatsoever, it could have snatched me up and tore me to shreds right then and there, and no one would have been the wiser.
Well, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself. I mean, after all, you had no clue what it was that you're dealing with. So, yeah, you can't be faulted for that. How concerned are you that Abigail might try to go outside and play with quote-unquote Randall?
I'm fairly concerned. I've had a couple of conversations with her since this incident, trying to impress upon her that what she saw was not a friendly cartoon character. And I think that I don't know how they could know it, but pop culture is in some ways irresponsible for really downplaying the danger of certain things. But like I said, I don't know how they could know, but she wasn't afraid the whole time. She wasn't scared. And even now, she's not scared. She doesn't think that it's anything other than this character she's seen in one of her favorite animated movies. So, it's something we're going to continue to talk about. And I'm going to do my best to impress upon her that just like with bears, just like with coyotes, you may have seen these things in the movies and shows you watch on TV, but they're not friendly and cuddly and only want to play games with you like you see on TV. These are real wild animals, and they don't have the capacity in the case of bears and coyotes to rationalize or think this person's trying to play, this human, this little baby human is trying to play and not attack me or hurt me. So she could very easily and very quickly get hurt. My wife and I kind of are a little bit at odds about this at this point in time, where she wants me to just kind of let it be, let it go, don't bring it up anymore, just let her forget about it. But this property, this house, and its surrounding land, it's been in my family since the early 1900s. Like I said, when my mom and my uncle pass away, it'll be handed down to me and eventually to my kids. So I have every intention of going back and, enjoying the fruits of my ancestors' labors. But at the same time, I want my daughter to be aware, if nothing else, that there are things and animals and creatures that share this space with us that are absolutely capable of either running off with her or eating her. And it's, like I said, it's a point of heavy contention right now between my wife and I, where she thinks the best course of action is to just let it go, try and forget about it, and kind of bury our heads in the sand, where I know from our conversation and what I've heard from the few episodes that I've listened to of your show, that if you've seen it on your property one time, there is a chance. It's difficult to put odds on it, but there is a chance you're going to see it again, that it's going to come back again. And if that's the case, if it's going to come back, I want her to be armed with as much information, much knowledge as she possibly can, that this is not a set of friendly cartoon character who wants to play with it.
You're handling the situation the right way, Matt. I just hope your wife comes around soon and sees the light. You describe yourself as being a night owl. Do you think your encounter will have any effect on your desire to keep late hours from here on out?
I don't think so. The job that I have, I'm working a third shift, so that's the time I'm usually awake anyway, and it's difficult to, switch that up just for the weekend to then turn back around and try and readjust the sleep pattern for the week. But even before then, when I was younger, before wife and kids, I've always been that way. More importantly, I'm not going to let an encounter with something that gets its jollies terrifying people stop me from living my life the way I want to live it.
Good man. You're a good man. I hope you stay that way. You might have answered this question already, but to bring clarity to it, would you say that your days of traveling alone in the backcountry are over, or do you plan to continue doing that?
I mean, as it was, I haven't gone out alone into the woods or the mountains on any kind of, even a hike, since I was probably about 15 or 16, just because of all of the run-in-the-mill standard hazards that you can run into being in the Rocky Mountains here, be it terrain, unexpected weather changes, or even wild animals. I've always been taught, and then when it was my turn to be the teacher, instructed that it is always best to not go out, especially on any kind of extended journey, by yourself. That it increases your chances of survivability in some kind of freak emergency situation, exponentially, if you have another person there with you. That being said, I think I'm probably going to be a little bit more selective about the people who I bring with me before I would take out family members who are maybe not necessarily physically fit or didn't have the same level of respect for the outdoors and the danger, but also the beauty that is there, that dichotomy that while things are incredibly beautiful and majestic, for lack of a better term, things can turn on a dime in an instant and go real bad real quick. I think I'm probably going to be backpacking with my veteran friends and my friends in law enforcement if I, make any plans for a trip anytime soon.
Well, it goes without saying, I'm so glad to hear that you continue to plan to enjoy the outdoors. It really would be a shame if you couldn't do that anymore. How much sleep have you gotten since all this happened Sunday night?
Well, the majority of it was last night. I got a good 8 hours then, but previous to that and our discussion, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours cumulatively, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. And even after, we left the mountains and we were back in the Denver metro area where we live, that fear level, that anxiety didn't decrease. It was still, because of, lack of knowledge on the situation, I had in my head what you see in pop culture or what you see in movies that, if you see, quote unquote, a werewolf, that it's going to follow you. It's stuck to you or whatever, and just expect for that to be a part of your life moving forward. So, but like I said, I slept quite a bit last night. My wife was gracious enough to let me sleep in as much as possible this morning.
Well, that's great news. I'm so glad to hear that you actually finally got some sleep. You're definitely well overdue. But having said that, Matt, it's about time for us to get out of here. But before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Yeah. My motivation for wanting to come forward and give my account is really to raise awareness, to make people aware that in this area that there are so many people who travel to and vacation at so regularly throughout the summer months and even after, that these things are in the area, or this one is in the area. To be aware that there's a possibility of encounter, albeit much smaller, chance of attack by one of these things, to not go out alone. Or if you're not able to bring somebody with you, make sure you're going out armed, both with knowledge and a firearm if possible, and then definitely let people know where you're going and when to expect you back.
Well, that's all really good advice. Really good advice. Well, Matt, I want to thank you so much for coming on and telling us about those experiences. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, Vic. I'm really glad that your show exists, that people who've had experiences like this can come forward and try and start the healing process from these traumatic events. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I wouldn't have it any other way. Thanks again so much. Have a great night. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.